All right, finally getting to part three of the building a gaming PC, or should you build a gaming PC. And this time we're going to talk about speccing out your system, what you should be looking for, things like that. Because I think this is a big portion where people either get stuck or end up overbuying or any number of a list of issues, right? Because if you've never really used a gaming PC and you're trying to build one, it's going to be quite easy to overbuild unnecessarily so. And I see that a lot. This happens with pre-builds too. The pre-build market, it's not that I'm against people selling pre-builds, but you know, your luck with that is going to be wide and far depending on where you're going, because if the person building PCs knows you know nothing, they're going to try to squeeze you for some. Some will do that. And so the key would be not to overbuy and then not to get a system that's locked to a point where you can't do much with it, right? And I know it may be confusing because we look at a pre-build and go, oh, it's got all this hardware. And, the guy tells me, hey, I can swap the video card out. That's great, but what about your storage options? Can you change those? Is there enough space in the PC case they provided or they bought? Because you have to remember, builders are going to build what's popular, what's not necessarily practical, right? So maybe you have this really awesome looking fish tank of a case, but then you realize you have no space for a mechanical hard drive. You have no space for additional SSDs. You can fit the NVMEs on a board, sure, but maybe you want other storage options. And later on, we'll talk about where you are going to want other storage options besides just the NVMe, which is important to be paying attention to. But so let's talk about specking, and let's start with kind of some simple stuff here. How should you spec out your system? My recommendation would be pick a game, a AAA title that you want to play. For me, it was Cyberpunk, which I still have not played. That's going to be a running joke for this channel, is that I just have not played it yet. But I picked Cyberpunk and I looked at the max settings to see what I was going to need. And I'll show those specs here in a little bit. And then also look at what else you're going to be doing. Do you plan on doing video editing? Do you plan on doing streaming? While video editing can be done pretty much anywhere within that spec build, you're generally not going to be doing video editing while you're playing a game. So to me, while it's important to look at the specifications for video editing, I wouldn't necessarily pair that with what you're going to be doing while you're playing a game or streaming. On the other hand, streaming a game, you know, while you're playing it is going to create an issue if you're not set up right. And you can get expensive builds and they're not really going to be well for that, depending on what you got. And again, with streaming, additional storage is going to be necessary. You do not want to be doing video editing on your primary drive. You also do not want to have one NVMe that's 512, gig or a terabyte, where you're doing your video editing, where you're doing game updates, everything else. You will destroy that NVMe pretty quickly. And I'll cover this again in storage, but that's why it's important to have more options for storage. For video editing, you don't need a super fast NVMe. Not even all games are going to need that. About 90% of the games you're going to play will work fine on a mechanical hard drive. Let's tree that out a little more, right? Let's say 80% of the games that you're going to play in a library may work better on an SSD. Actually, require, but may work better on an SSD, not an NVMe, an SSD, but can be played off of a mechanical hard drive. We're talking older titles that you may be into. And then SSD territory is maybe for stuff that came out a little after the Xbox One era, and then NVMe should be reserved for bigger titles that are going to require a lot more loading demand on the hard drive. Cyberpunk, Baldur's Gate 3, stuff like that. And you should experiment with those things in your build to get really comfortable knowing what you're going to do and what's going to work and what's not. Streaming, I'm gonna put this out there. People aren't gonna like this, but gaming in 4K and streaming in 4K is useless and ridiculous. Do not spec a system to that. One, it's an easy way to easily get into a $3,000 to $6,000 machine. You may think that sounds ridiculous, but if you plan on trying to stream in 4K while playing a game in 4K, the demand on your system is going to be immense. It is going to be an issue. Not to mention storage is going to be ridiculous. Realistically, as I keep saying, and is going to be a theme throughout this series that I do, is that any streaming you're going to do, shoot for 1080. 720 might even be better for your stream output. Keep in mind, a lot of people, and there's stats out there for this, a lot of people are watching streams on a phone at 720. and some are at 1080, but not a lot of people are watching on their phone or on a portable device or on a computer are watching your game stream at 4K. It's the bandwidth requirements are just really far out there for that. So, and then storage on a 4K video is going to be massive, even in well compressed situations. You know, an hour of that is going to be humongous. So my advisement is spec your system based off of the ultra systems, ultra settings, if you will, for expansion purposes. But realistically, you're going to want to be at the 1080 setting, because looking at all of that, you know, it's more practical. And building a system for 1080 is going to be able to put you in a position where you're not spending that much more. I think even now you can probably do a machine for around $2,000, and we're talking end of March 2026 right now as I make this video. You should be able to make a machine for around $2,000, have a good experience, have expandable options later on, but still be good for the next 5 years before you need an upgrade. If you spec a system at the ultra system requirements for a game that's dated now, like Cyberpunk, which, you know, you want to pick a different title, but those system requirements are still good, and they'll make sure that you're staying up to date and you're relevant within gaming for, again, at least 5 years before you need to look at upgrading something like your GPU. You'll get a lot of mileage out of your hardware without having to spend a lot and not have to worry about, you know, going forward. But if your goal is 4K streaming, 4K gameplay, or just 4K gameplay, this is probably not the series for you, because you're, in my opinion, you're in a realm of unrealistic expectations out of gaming for multiple reasons. One, I don't think that paying extra money to play in 4K for something that's going to be AI upscaled or something that has to be upscaled is worth it. I just don't. I think it's a waste, and I think it's something that you are supporting a bad practice in game dev, you know, that should not be continued, which is we're not actually making these games true to spec like that. We're relying on a lot of software to upscale that way farther than it needs to be. Stick to 1080. Same with frame rate. You may be gaming at 200, 300, 400 frames a second. I know it sounds ridiculous, but some people strive for that. The stream isn't going to handle that, though, if you're streaming games. As I've said before, spec your system out in realistic conditions. 1080p resolution max, 1440 if you're feeling like you may want to try that out. But 60 FPS is sufficient for games that are single player cinematic, right? And then maybe a max of 144 for competitive, Fortnite, Apex, stuff like that, right? I think that 120 is fine. 144, you might notice a little bit of difference, but in general play, for me, in a lot of competitive games, the view distance is more important than the frame rate being higher than 120, right? I want to be able to see things far out and have the capability to render things far out over what somebody else may be doing. Maybe a person does have 200 frames per second, but are they able to do a level of detail and view distance way far out? You know, that's what I'm looking at. Because I want to be able to see as much as possible. I want to have fast reaction times, yes, but I don't want it to be to a point where it's useless. And I think a lot of people get out. When I see people doing 4K, 200 FPS, and they're complaining about game performance, it really is ridiculous, because it shows me that a lot of people still do not understand what they're doing. And while developers are to blame for games not being well optimized, complaining about a game performing badly when you're pushing it beyond what it should be running realistically, again, 4K at 200 FPS or higher, is really ridiculous. When you should be shooting for 1440, you know, at maybe 144 for competitive, 1080 at 120. That's where I would stick. That's where I would be. So, you know, that's where you really have to look at things and see how it is. If you're running a machine and you built a machine 1440p capable, and then you want to play around with settings and see what it looks like higher, do that. And then compare it to 1080. A lot of people are not going to notice the difference. I guarantee you they're not, because they have multiple issues. One, they sit too close to their monitor, their TV. The TV's the wrong size. The resolution isn't going to make a difference if those things are mismatched. They're not going to see the difference in frame rate. But so many people are being sold on things they don't need because they don't understand the tech they're using. They just don't. And so it's easy to spend, again, $3,000 to $6,000 on a computer thinking you've got this massively wonderful machine, and then you're going to start having issues. And that's taking for granted the fact that maybe your hardware isn't mismatched, because you can have a monster video card, a mid CPU, you know, and you're wasting your graphics card. And I don't do testing for systems, but I can guarantee you there are a number of pre-builds that are done that way. They got the mid-range CPU they could afford business-wise to build bunches of machines, and then got the one part that everybody's looking at, which is the graphics card. Because a lot of people I see in forums and elsewhere, they're paying attention to solely the GPU, but are not paying attention to the GPU, sorry, and they're not paying attention to the CPU. And then people come in and comment are like, hey, that's great and all, but you're going to be bottlenecked by the CPU. And they're like, you know what you're talking about. And I don't care. It's a monster graphics card. What does that matter? And they don't get it. And then RAM, overbuying on RAM, which right now is not an issue, but I saw systems that were shipping with like 64 gigs RAM that would have either a slow speed or the speed would be fine. But it's like, you're not going to use 64 gigs of RAM. The average person that's doing gaming, even if they're streaming, is not going to use 64 gigs of RAM. It's not going to happen. And not unless you're doing so much stuff that you're really over encumbering your system to begin with. So keep those things in mind. All right, so let's talk about specs. I pulled the Phantom Liberty specs page. Most games are going to have a specs page that looks the same, or specifications for what you need. You can see we've got a couple of points there. We have minimum, recommended, ultra. There's ray tracing minimum, ray tracing recommended, ray tracing overdrive. For the most part, we're going to be looking at the recommended, which is 1080, and then the ray tracing recommended, okay? And I want you to note here that this is a modernish game with high-end specs, and if you notice, I don't know, what you're looking for, but note that they have it pretty much saying 60 FPS. I think for Cyberpunk, you're fine at that. Again, cinematic, solo play style, it'd be fine. Having said that, I do think that you could probably push this to 120 without an issue on the 1080, but the Ultra at 2160, as far as I'm seeing here, the only difference that I see is the resolution. We're skipping 1440 to get to, 4K, which I think is ridiculous. So we're going to ignore all of that. And we're going to look at the 1080 settings. So if you spec based off of this, 1080 at 60 FPS, we'll say 1080, 60 FPS up to 120 and 1440p, 60. You could probably do it 1440. I don't see that'd be an issue, but we'll go at the 1080 because that's been the focus of the videos I'm doing and is going to be the focus going forward. Pardon me. We're going to look at this. We're going to see you need a Core i7 or a Ryzen 7. So this should be the minimum that you should probably spec your processor to. Now, with that 7800X 3D, there are probably other options. I myself am not concerned with the X3D processing because I do video editing as well. So if you're just doing gaming and the price is right, maybe go with an X3D processor. But I would not recommend it if you're going to be doing multiple tasks. If you're going to be doing streaming as well. I understand the purpose of the X3D, but I really don't care about small percentage boosts. I'm going to talk about that in later videos too. I don't care about small percentage gains in performance. When I hear people saying, and we're not confusing this with 1% lows in frame rates, we're not talking about that. When I watch review channels and like, you should get this processor, it gives you a 3% performance increase. I don't care about a 3% performance increase, and you should not either. I don't care. It's sales point, and that's about it. I do not care about 1% to 3% increase in performance. That's, to me, it's a waste of money. So, spec out what processors look close to what the game is going to want. What is the Ryzen 7? What should you be looking for in that, and go from there. Same with the graphics card. I think at this point, having 16 gigs of graphics memory is a good spot. 12, I think you can do 12. I think in a lot of games, 8 will be fine. But again, for games like Cyberpunk, Baldur's Gate 3, you're going to want at least 12 at this point. That's where I would put things. And again, that kind of lines up here, as you can see on the Ultra, they're saying 12 gigs, but I think that having 12 as a minimum is going to give you a good spread on games. If you can get a card with 16 gigs, do so. It'll get you a good spread of what you need. Pardon me. And then RAM, no more than 32 gigs. 32 gigs should be your max. And for speed, 6400 MTs should be the max you're going for. Anything past that, you're wasting your time and you're wasting your money. Again, 16 should be your minimum on any build. If all you can afford to do is get 16 gigs RAM, do that. And then upgrade to 32 later on. And again, even if you're going 16, do not go faster than the 6400 MTs. It's not, I don't think it's necessary. Storage, this is a larger game. A lot of these games that are coming out AAA are large titles. You're going to need storage. This is where I would have a dedicated 1 terabyte NVMe that is not your primary hard drive. Pardon me. Sorry, this section of the video, I'm just not doing well. A 1 terabyte NVMe for a gaming drive for faster games. We're talking that demand fast loading. Cyberpunk, Baldur's Gate 3, Helldivers. Even Helldivers would benefit from using, or Helldivers 2, I should say, would benefit from having a drive like that. Upcoming titles, Grand Theft Auto 6, if that's what you're looking at getting into, you should really be looking at having a separate NVMe for games that require more demanding load times. And on that, go for a higher end. Don't do like a Western Digital Black. I wouldn't recommend that. But go for a drive that's going to have those faster transfer speeds. I liked the Crucial P3, but those may be an issue to get a hold of now. But you know, those are good places to start and will maintain you for a while. There is going to be a point where the load times are just only going to get so good. They're only going to get so good, right? And again, pardon me. And again, when you start looking at load times, if it's going to take you 3 seconds to load the game up, and then somebody goes, you can get this faster NVMe and it's going to take you 2.5 seconds, does it really matter? And I don't think it does. I don't think that is something, all in all, that makes a difference. So, you know, that's kind of where we're at in that respect with specifications. And again, pull up a game that you're really interested in, spec that game out for 1080 at 60 FPS if it's solo play. Fortnite is a good place too, believe it or not. Fortnite is a great place for multiplayer to really, really base your build off of if you're doing multiplayer because of how demanding it is. I play Fortnite in 1080 at 1440 and I have everything maxed and it runs beautifully. And I have an almost infinite view distance. I can see players very far across the map as long as it's a good plane of view. And then I also have a good reaction time in there. So things like that matter within your build. And a game like Fortnite is very demanding because of everything that is going on. So that's a good place to start for the multiplayer. If you pair that with a solo play game, AAA title where you're trying to figure out what to do, it can help you a lot. I will say that I do think a lot of issues people experience in games, while yes, developers are to blame for a lot of poor development, it's bad builds or bad configuration settings that people just do not look at. That creates issues. All right, so moving on now to kind of what's common. If you look at the Steam hardware survey, they do a hardware survey. Steam does a hardware survey where they collect data on various builds, and they show you what the common use is. And the last I looked, it looks like over half, 53% of people are doing 1080. They're not running higher than that. There's just not a need for that. And you know, they're probably doing 30 to 144 FPS on a lot of games, depending on what they're doing. Again, based on the collection of cards used and stuff, it looks like most people are doing 60 FPS in solo play, which matches a lot of what I'm talking about. Because a lot of people don't have the money to spend on expensive builds to get, you know, almost nothing more out of what they're doing. And looking at builds, when it comes to 4K, in order for you to enjoy 4K, you need to be farther away from the monitor you're using. It's wasted. It's the same with like using 1080 too. There's a point where a monitor can be too small for 1080 or it can be too big for 1080. Pardon me. For most people with 4K, they're not going to have a monitor big enough and they're going to be sitting too close. And they're going to think they're getting something great when they're not realizing they're not. Because people still run on this assumption that I spent more money, it must be better. And that's not the case. So if you need help with building, what should you do? One, you can use something like Newegg's build tool. It can be a little clunky. I don't overly advise that until you get to the part where you're ready to start buying stuff. PC Parts Picker is a great place to start. PC Parts Picker will let you put a build together, and then it will give you an idea of how much power the system's going to use. So if you spec your power supply in last, you'll get to know how much juice your machine's going to use and what wattage you're going to need. It'll help you accurately get a power supply together. That being said, I don't think you'd be too far off or too bad off buying an 800 watt power supply by default, and staying within the range of what that's going to handle will help you out. Additionally, PC Parts Picker doesn't do well with all fits. I don't think it tells you what fans are going to fit necessarily. So pay attention to the fan spacing in your case. And again, the size of the fans you're going to need, I'll talk about cooling later on, but the size of the fans you get, if you get the bigger fans, they're going to run quieter at heavier loads. That's kind of the advantage of using that, and you can have less of them. If you're into wanting more color, getting smaller fans is going to make more noise, but you get more of that color out of it. It really is a design choice. Again, that'll be another video on its own. But PC Parts Picker will tell you whether a part is compatible or not. It'll tell you if the GPU you got is going to work with the board or not. Granted, you can go to the board manufacturer, the motherboard manufacturer, and see their compatibility charts. But if that's a little more complicated for you, use PC Parts Picker, because it's going to at a minimum tell you if the GPU and the RAM are going to work or not. And then it'll give you an idea what's there. But you do need to be paying attention to the case you're getting. If you plan on doing a lot of expansion, get a full ATX case. I don't think you need a gargantuan case, but get at least an ATX that's going to handle a full ATX board. Full ATX boards, I think I covered this before briefly, full ATX boards are going to have more expandability options. Meaning if you want to add additional drives, you think you need more storage, you want more compatibility, a full ATX build is going to get you that. Whereas a micro ATX is going to be, it's going to fit more, or an MATX is going to fit more compact designs, but its expansion options are going to be a lot lower. Obviously, that makes sense. There's less board there. There's less room for more parts and stuff on that board. Where I'm going to skip to where not to buy parts and where to buy parts, and that'll probably finish this video up. But Amazon's a good place to go to, but be careful with Amazon at this point, because of the fact that what I had problems with is when I was getting parts on Amazon, the price was great, and then I was getting used parts. Not that used parts are bad, but for your first build, I would highly recommend that unless you don't have any other option, buy new parts if you can, just to have the warranty in there. Because that can be more of a headache during the build process, getting used parts. If you do want to get used parts, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist are good places to look, but you're going to have to be really savvy on what you're getting, because one of two problems is going to occur. One, you're going to be buying parts from somebody that has no idea what they're doing, and they're going to overprice or underprice, or a part may be broken and they don't know. Or two, you're going to find somebody that's going to try to scam you with broken parts. You can get lucky. I've seen a number of videos people have done, and I've had luck in my personal life getting machines where people said, hey, it just won't turn on, I don't know what's wrong. It ended up being a bad power supply or bad processor, but I would get, a couple $100 worth of parts for maybe $100. That's happened to me before, and I've seen other people have similar luck. So keep that in mind. But your best bet if you're building new is going to be online. As much as people hate this, Newegg and Amazon. You may have to buy between both of those to get best price, but that's probably going to be your best bet. And then if you have the option and you physically want to go and the pricing's right, Micro Center does have some good builds. None of this video is sponsored by anything or anyone. I'm just putting out there my experience with that. I did not get parts from Micro Center. I have one near me in Denver. I'm in Colorado. I'm not in Denver. I'm about an hour and a half away, but I could have gone parts out there if I need. And if I need to get a part same day, something breaks, that's probably what I'll end up doing, is going out there, because I know they'll have it in most cases. And then last thing you can do, this is more of a stretch if you're not against using AI for this. I think this is a better case use for AI. Use something like ChatGPT and ask it, here is the build I have. You can pull your specs from PC Parts Picker, but here is the build I have. How will this game run? At what frame rates? At what resolution? Or tell it, I'm running this game at 1080 up to 120 FPS. How will it run with this hardware? And it will get you a fairly accurate rundown of how that machine's going to run. And that can give you an idea of what to do. So that's kind of what I would recommend specking things out, and what I would do if I was going through and building things, and kind of where to start. It's a good baseline. Obviously, you need to be looking into the parts more carefully, looking at price and stuff. And again, to give you an idea of how well built can be, I want you to keep in mind that the Steam machine, right now as it's spec'd, they're claiming that they're going to try to get 4K gaming off of a Zen 4, which is previous generation AMD hardware. Now, granted, they're using a semi-custom GPU and CPU, but if they're building off of previous gen hardware and they're claiming to be able to hit 4K on a Steam machine, there is no reason why you can't do a Zen 4, a Zen 5 build in AMD and hit better performance, in my opinion. I would still not go for 4K. Even if I was getting a Steam machine, which I'm not, I would still be doing 1080 only. And I think for a lot of people, and this will probably be something that's seen, I think when the Steam machine comes out, people are going to have problems with the 4K gaming at higher frame rates, and they're going to be upset considering what they got, and they're going to blame it on price, when the reality is you should probably be only be doing 1080, 60 for single player cinematic, and 1080, 144 for multiplayer games. That's if you can play, as I can't talk, because of the issue with anti-cheat that's going to be inevitable on the Steam machine. That's going to be the biggest sticking point for a lot of people. They're not going to pay attention to that, and they're not going to be able to play titles like Battlefield. So, and I do not see Steam fixing that issue before the full release. Keep in mind, the target, so far, the rumored price point is $1,000 to $1,500 on that, and no, just spend the $500 more and get you a beefy gaming rig. Beyond that, we also have, Project Helix for Microsoft, which I think is going to be similar to what Steam is doing, but I think they're going to try to aim for maybe streamed games, and I'm not a fan of that either. I want my games installed locally, and I'd like to be able to have more than just a streaming box. I am happy to see them doing backwards compatibility. As more information comes out, I'll probably do a video similar to the Steam box or Steam machine video that I did, but about that new Microsoft products, more information comes out, but I think it's still early to be doing too much on that. So anyway, if you have further questions about specking out a build, or questions for things I didn't cover here, let me know in the comments below. Like, share, sub for more. I'm going to try to get these videos out a little more quickly. I've just been fairly busy, so I do apologize for the drop off in the content creation. I'm going to try to stream some more games as well, but we'll see where that's all going. Feel free to, if you see me streaming on Twitch, to hop in and ask questions there. I can answer those for you there as well. Any questions you have will probably help out with future videos that I do, but that's all I got for now, guys. Hope that helps, and it is not, I will say it now, it is not hopeless or impossible to build a gaming rig right now, even with everything going on. It's more difficult, yes, but it is not impossible. So if you want me to get a more specific set of content out, let me know in the comments as well below, and we'll see what we can do with that. But for now, guys, that's all I've got for you. I hope this was helpful. We will have more videos in the series coming out. I've got at least 10 right now planned out. There will probably be more as I branch out on this. So if you want me to get to a topic sooner, because we're going to start getting into the hardware portion of things, let me know, and I can move that up in the line if it's more important to you, and we'll go from there. But anyways, thanks again for watching, guys. Hope this helps, and I look forward to getting more of these videos out.